Hello and welcome back to History Adulan. Today we are going to start with 9th standard second lesson, Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. In fact, this lesson is divided into two sections. The first one, we will be dealing about the socialism in Europe, and second half is all about the Russian Revolution. This lesson is going to be a little lengthier and we are going to study it in detail. So before studying what is socialism, how it evolved in Europe and what are the factors that led to socialism, let us see what was the background in Europe that forced emergence of socialism. Since this period is described as the age of social changes, the French Revolution had a great impact not only on European societies but same time on the different continents of the world like Asia, Africa and others. Indian social reformer Rajaram Mohan Roy was greatly influenced by the French Revolution and he discussed a lot about the French Revolution. Thus, need felt to reshape the ideas of social change. The responses were different in the different societies to that of liberals, radicals, conservatives and nationalists. Karl Marx was born in Germany, but later on he went to England. There he met Friedrich Engels and both worked hand in hand to develop an ideology called communism. By mid of 19th century, that is from 1850s to 1880s, there were a lot of debate about the ideas of socialism. Even industries witnessed a lot of social changes. In Germany, Socialist Democratic Party, England, Labour Party, France, Socialist Party, and in Russia, Russian Socialist Democratic Workers' Party. This is what we are going to study in this lesson, the socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. So this is simply the gist or the summary of full lesson so that you should have a clarity about the lesson. What we are going to start, what are the highlighting points which we will be discussing in more detail in this lesson. So let's begin with the second lesson.
First, let's see the opinion of liberals, radicals and conservatives about the social change in Europe. First, liberals. They were secular and favored right of individuals. They opposed uncontrolled power of dynastic rulers. They were not democrats and not believed in universal adult franchise. Liberals were open to the new ideas. Second, radicals. They wanted government of majority population. They supported women's suffrage movement. They expect that women should be given right to vote. They opposed privileged wealthy land and factory owners. They disliked concentration of wealth in few hands. They wanted radical, quick change in the society. Third were the conservatives. As name suggests, they were rigid and stick to the old ideologies. They believe in monarchic form of government. They opposed liberals and radical ideas. But after the French Revolution, they slowly opened up their minds for the change. Same time, they believed that the past has to be respected if they are going for the change. They expect the change slow and gradual. The reformers who expect the change were called nationalists. They wanted to put an end to monarchical government in France, Italy, Germany and Russia. Giuseppe Mazzini achieved this in Italy. Same thing was done in Germany. Thus, nationalist ideas got popularity. Now let's see what were the outcomes. Liberals and radicals themselves were the property owners and employers. They believed that the workforce must be healthy and educated, which will increase profit for them. They firmly believe in individual labor and enterprise. They opposed privileges of old aristocracy. Various attempts of revolutionaries and nationalists created mass awakening and forced the haves to accept the change.
There were social and economic changes in the industrial society too. It also saw growth of cities and emergence of new industrial regions or the areas. Same time, there was expansion of railways and the industrial revolution occurred. But along with the positive sides, it also brought some negative aspects. It brought men, women and children to the factories, which led to disruption of the family unit. Same time, the working hours were long and the working conditions were very poor, and even the wages which were paid to them were very low.
After long introduction, let's see the socialism in Europe. In mid-19th century, this ideology was popularized. What is socialism? There are several definitions given by different social thinkers. 1. All people are equal and should share equally. Means of production, distribution and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community. Third, believe in collective efforts of the people. Some example of socialist countries. Earlier, Soviet Union and Nazi were the example, while in contemporary world today we have Cuba, Venezuela and China, best example of socialist communist countries. Whom we can say socialist? People against private property or capitalists are called socialist. We can have a solution to this problem by forming the cooperatives. These were associations of people who produced goods together and divided the profit according to the work done by the members. Cooperatives proved to be most beneficial and important in most of the societies of Europe. Now let's see the socialists. They were divided into two types. One wanted cooperative to be built by rich individuals. Example, Robert Owen, New Harmony in Indiana, USA. He of the belief that cooperative should be built by rich individuals. While there was another opinion of Louis Blanc. He said, and he wanted cooperatives to be built by the government. So there has to be control of the government. If individual have a control, then it may lead to inequality. So there has to be a neutral institute or the government which will intervene. In the year 1848, Karl Heinrich Marx and Friedrich Engels gave an new concept of communism. This communism felt there is a problem in the society, and that is capitalist society who use all the resources of the country and exploited the working or the poor class. And they had a solution in this ideology, and that was communist society, which must based on equality. They must give more power to the workers and the have-nots.
That is all about what is socialism and how it evolved in Europe and what impact it created on the European societies. Now let's come to the very important part of this lesson, the Russian Revolution. This Russian were also ruled by the monarchs. There was an emperor, Tsar Nicholas II, who was a despotic ruler in Russia, whose rule was not liked by the Russians, and that's why they revolted against him. In February 1917, the monarchic government was overthrown, and by October 1917, the government in Russia was overtaken by the people.
Like French Revolution or the fight against the monarchy and to establish liberty, equality, fraternity and democratic rights. Same way, there was a fight, revolt, revolution in Russia against monarchy, Tsar Nicholas II. Fall of monarchy in February 1917, and socialists took over the government through October Revolution 1917. This event together is called Russian Revolution. Let's look at the map from 1913 to 1917 of Russia. Empire in present day: Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine, Poland, Belarus, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. This was the part of Russia. Major religions which were practiced in Russia were Orthodox Christian, Catholics, Protestant, Muslims and Buddhists. Let's see how was the economy and society in Russia. Majority population in Russia were agriculturists and major exporters of grain. Workers were divided into several social groups. Despite they were united during the strikes. Peasants in countryside cultivated land, but large properties were owned by nobility, Orthodox Church and the crown. Nobility got power and position through tsar, since working class had no respect to nobility. Instead wanted their land. They refused to pay them rent, and even most of the time there were differences arrived and they murdered the landlords. During monarchic government, all the political parties were declared illegal before 1914. Russian Socialist Democratic Workers' Party was founded in 1898 on Marxist ideology. It set up newspapers, mobilized workers, organized strikes. They also formed Socialist Revolutionary Party in 1900. Party struggled for peasants' rights, demanded land for landless. Socialists believe in collectivization. But Lenin felt that the peasants were not one united group. They were heterogeneous group of peasants. That is, some were rich, some were poor, some were labor, while some were capitalist and even employed several workers under them. Thus, all were not part of revolution, being there was heterogeneous group of peasants. The party was divided further into two groups, Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. Bolsheviks means the extremist, while Menshevik means the moderates. Bolshevik extremists were headed by Vladimir Lenin, while Mensheviks or the moderates were headed by Kerensky.
A turbulent time, 1905 revolution. A procession of workers headed by Father Gapon marched on Winter Palace at St. Petersberge in Russia on 22nd January 1905. The police or the soldiers who were guarding the palace, they thought this workers group had come to attack the palace, and in this misunderstanding they attacked back the workers. Over 100 workers were killed and more than 300 workers were wounded. So this incident turned as incident of Bloody Sunday.
This led to series of events known as 1905 revolution. Tsar allowed creation of an elected consultative parliament or Duma. Several restrictions were placed on political activities of the common masses. Tsar dismissed the first Duma within 75 days and re-elected second Duma within 3 months. He did not wanted any questioning of his authority. Changed voting laws, packed third Duma with conservative politicians, while liberals, revolutionaries were kept out.
The First World War broke out in the year 1914 between two mighty European alliances, Germany, Russia, Turkey, which was a central power, and France, Britain, Russia, Italy and Romania was allied power.
Each European country had a global empire and a war was fought in Europe and outside. It had severe impact on industries. Russia was cut off from industrial supply of goods by German control in Baltic Sea. By 1916, even the railway line was break down. Able-bodied men were engaged in war since there was labor shortage. Large supplies of grain were used to feed the army. Evolved riots at bread shops, hence bread and flour became scarce.
Monarchy was brought down in Russia with February Revolution of 1917. Emperor monarch Tsar Nicholas II was abdicated on 2nd March, and the Provisional Government was formed in Russia to run the country.
It's quite interesting to know what happened after February. In April 1917, Vladimir Lenin returned to Russia from his exile. He and Bolsheviks opposed war since 1914. He declared to stop the war. He asked the transfer of land to the peasants from the nobility and banks to be nationalized. These three demands were called Lenin's thesis. Workers' movement were intensified at this time, and soldiers' committees were formed in army in the support of the Bolshevik and the Socialist. The power of provisional government was reduced. They became less popular, while the Bolshevik influence was increased and they got the public support. Since the provisional government of Menshevik used stern measures against the spreading discontent, they arrested the Bolshevik leaders, repressed the demonstrations. Bolshevik leaders since went into hiding or some fled. Peasants in a countryside seized lands between July and September from the nobility. Revolution or uprising began on 24th October 1917. The Bolshevik leaders and the common revolutionaries came on the road, and there was a great threat to the life of Prime Minister. Sensing the trouble, Prime Minister Kerensky left the city. Military Revolutionary Committee seized government offices and arrested several ministers. By nightfall on that day, the city was under the committee's control. Uprising spread to the other cities in Russia. There was heavy fighting in Moscow. By December, Bolsheviks controlled Moscow and Petrograd. October Revolution was a great victory of Bolsheviks. Now, what changed after October? Let's see. Bolsheviks were totally opposed to private property. The lands were declared as social property in Russia. Peasants were allowed to seize the lands of nobility. They banned on old titles of aristocracy. To assess change, new uniform designed for army and officials. Bolshevik Party was renamed as Russian Communist Party. In the years that followed, the Bolsheviks became the only party in Russia. Russia became the one-party state. Party had a control over all the trade unions. Thus, they also had secret police called Cheka, which punished those who work against the Bolsheviks. They put a censorship or a ban. Many young artists, writers rallied for the change. Though through Russian Revolution, Bolshevik established their upper hand, there were some communities which were unhappy and felt insulted. They were non-Bolsheviks, liberals and supporters of aristocracy. They condemned Bolsheviks' uprising. They organized troops to fight against Bolshevik. They were called the Reds. By 1918 to 19, the socialist revolutionaries, the Green, and the pro-Tsarist, the Whites, controlled most of Russia. Supporters of private property took harsh steps against the peasants who seized their lands. French, American, Britain, Japanese troops helped non-Bolsheviks since they were worried of growth of socialism in Russia. Bolsheviks fought a civil war with these troops. This became famous as Civil War.
Now, a process of centralized planning was introduced. Same time, a 5-year plan was adopted for its economic prosperity. New factory cities came into being, and same time an extended schooling system was introduced. Government fixed all the prices of the goods to promote the industrial growth. Same time, there was 100% growth in oil, coal and metal. Creches were established for the children of women workers. Same time, the better health facilities were provided at low cost, and the housing, that is the model quarters, were also made available for the workers.
Stalin's leadership helped the Russia to gain socialist ideas spread in the country. After his death, there was a rise of Stalinism and collectivization. Joseph Stalin headed party after the death of Lenin. He introduced firm emergency measures. He asked rich peasants, kulakars, or the traders not to hold stock of grains. Kulakars were eliminated by taking their lands back. He established state control over the large farms. Bolshevik party forced all peasants to cultivate in collective farms called kolkhozs. Those who opposed collectivization were severely punished. Many were deported and exiled. The bad harvest of 1930-33 led to devastating famine. Around 4 million people died in this famine. By 1939, over 2 million people were imprisoned for not following the party. Any historical event leaves a long-lasting and permanent impact on the minds of people and the society. Like American War of Independence left a permanent mark on the societies, and it proved that the common masses can fight against the mighty power and change the power in country. So this was understood by the people of France, and they revolted back against the monarchs, and they got liberty, equality, fraternity and democratic rights in their country. This change, social political change, was fascinated by the European nations, and they came up with the ideology called socialism. Now, this had a global influence. So what was that global influence of Russian Revolution and the USSR? People across the world were fascinated by the idea of worker states. Workers can unite and workers can make their own government, this was proved. Communist parties were formed in many countries. Example, Communist Party in Britain. The Bolshevik founded Comintern, that is an international union of pro-Bolshevik socialist party. So this was the impact of Bolshevik ideology or the way of working on the world. USSR had given the socialism as a global face. A backward country had become a great power, so much so that it became powerful and a competitor with shoulder in shoulder with USA. Its industries and agriculture had developed, but it denied essential freedom to its citizens on the other hand, carried out development projects through repressive policies. By end of 20th century, its international reputation as socialist country had declined. But in many countries, ideas of socialism are still rethought and respected.
That's all about our lesson, Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. I tried my level best to teach you in most simplified method. Thank you very much and stay tuned for the upcoming lessons.